Those who can, please stand for our national anthem. Sarah Shepard, Byron and Susie Lucas, and students will lead us in our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Amen.
Thank you all. Beautiful. Thank you all. Beautiful. Today, we're here to honor and remember veterans from this 5-county region: Allen, Barron, Hart, Metcalfe, and Monroe counties, who served during the Korean War era, 1950 to 1955. There's an exhibit on the second floor in the Snavely Gallery that showcases our veterans and events of the Korean War era. This will be available through the middle of July. So if you don't get a chance to go up there today, you can come back. There are binders for you to review and research information that we have been able to uncover about our 1950 to 55 veterans. These binders are part of the Cultural Center's permanent collection. If your veteran is not included in these, please bring us photos and information of their 50 to 55 military service, and it will be added to these binders. At the end of our program, we would like to get photos of our 1950 to 55 veterans who are present here today with their families, and a group photo of all the Korean War era veterans on the steps in the lobby out here. Sandy and Marcia, 2 volunteers, will be located at the foot of the stairs in the lobby to take your photos. And now, to remember and honor veterans in these 5 counties, we want to share with you just some of their stories. We've had a little change in the program. We're not going to start with Mr. Brown. We're going to start with Mr. DeVore's story. So our Metcalfe County veteran is Mr. Rondell DeVore, who is present with us today. He's sitting here on the front row. A brief news clip of an interview with Mr. DeVore is playing on the TV screen in the exhibit on the second floor. This is from an interview that took place in 2019 at the time he and his son took an honor flight to Washington, D.C. I hope you will take the time to watch and listen to his recollection of being held captive and his amazing escape to freedom. If you receive the Barron County Progress, this week's edition covers Mr. DeVore's story and highlights that his image is the only Kentuckian etched on the National Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. The article that appears is a well-written one by Miss Paula Ratliff. I'm assuming she's here today. Okay, in the back. If any of our veterans who are present today would like their story told, please see Miss Ratliff. She would enjoy interviewing and putting your story to print. She will do an excellent job, and it will be recorded in the Progress for our local history. And she has brought, I believe she said she was bringing 100 copies of the DeVore article. So there should be enough for everyone. Mr. DeVore wrote several stories of his time with the 623rd in Korea. The story that is told today is taken from his own words, as printed in the Senior Quest magazine, and is presented today by Mr. Jesse Brown.
I apologize for the changes in the program. I have a meeting I must attend at my church, and graciously they have agreed to let me go first. As she said, this is an article that was shared by Ron DeVore in Senior Quest magazine in 2002, entitled Operation Rat Killer. During the time period in which Operation Rat Killer took place, I was serving the headquarters battery of the 623rd Field Artillery Battalion in Korea under the experienced command of World War II Lieutenant Colonel Frederick R. Ganter, assisted by the following cadre of staff officers: Captains James Trigg Pace, Bobby Richardson, Lauren Williams, Charles Allen Bradshaw, and Lieutenants Rondell Soup Oliver, Louis Rayburn, Ephraim Berry, Robert Lessenberry, James Crow, and Jesse Wilkerson, along with warrant officers Howard Malcolm Jones and Aubrey Crow. One day, after the Chinks had thrown everything at us but rocks, the 10th Corps, which the 623rd Field Artillery was assigned to, had us take our tents down, fold them up, and slip them back and ship them back to the Quartermaster Corps. They were not greatly concerned about us. We were expendable. We had to save those tents at all cost. This left regular soldiers like me out in the cold, and I mean completely out in the cold. Snow, rain, or whatever, we were the first to know when there was a change in the weather. We received orders to dig in, so underground bunkers were constructed. First, we used pick, shovels, and dynamite to dig holes in the ground. Then beg, borrow, or steal equipment from logs to cover the holes in the ground. Then we'd find smaller logs and place them between the larger ones, and even smaller ones will then top off the whole thing. After these logs had settled a few days, then dirt was hauled in and piled on top of the log pile. Hopefully this great storm cellar would stand up under a direct hit from enemy shells. While all this wonderful construction was taking place, all of the radio section that I was assigned to enjoyed getting acquainted with sleeping on the bare ground. Hoping to hell we did not wake up and find our throats had been cut during the night by some North Korean guerrilla fighter doing one of the things that they were so damn good at. After far too many nights of sleeping on the ground, William Turner from Temple Hill, Kentucky, Bill Higdon from Lamb, Kentucky, And Corporal Nick Nicholson from Cleveland, Ohio, and I had had our mansion ready to move into. We built 4 bunker beds, one upper and one lower on each side, with about 2.5 feet of dirt floor between the lower ones. Using telephone wires that we had borrowed from the wire section, it was possible to string the wire around small poles and make a base to lay out our bunks, sleeping bags, pardon me. At the time, I seemed to have lucked out and was in the top bunk. Later on, when the spring rains came and the weight of those logs and dirt started to press down, each night one of those big logs got closer to my nose. Okay. The 3-foot wide entrance had been dug at a slope down to the floor of the bunker, making it easier to slide down on your backside when you heard that eerie whistling sound announcing the arrival of an enemy artillery round. Called incoming mail by our troops, each soldier prayed that it would not be the shell with his name on it. The sloping entrance was great when making a running, foot straight forward bonsai 3-point slide down into the bunker. We found out real quickly, though, that it was also extremely good for letting water run down when the spring rains came. We had a nice, soft 3-inch cushion of gooey mud to walk around in. One night, sometime around early April of 1952, I was asleep in the top bunk on the right side of our underground bunker. William Turner was snoring away in the lower bunk on the opposite side. Corporal Nicholson and PFC Higdon must have been on radio duty because they were both gone. Because the other guys knew that I was a light sleeper, I was always complaining about them making noise when I was trying to go to sleep. They had elected me as the official watchdog for our group. I know this will drive the anti-gun nuts crazy, but most of the time I slept with a .45 Colt automatic in my right hand, lying across my chest with a hammer cocked and pointed straight at the entrance end of the bunker. I would be holding a flashlight pointed in the same direction in my left hand. All the other guys knew if I was in the bunker, when they came in at ground level, they would call out their names and say, "Hey, DeVore, you idiot, don't shoot, it's me." Anyway, both Turner and I were sleeping away, dreaming about some girls back in good old Kentucky. And I was awakened by a slight noise and felt something moving around on my legs way up too close to my crotch. My whole body immediately froze, stiff as a trunk of wood. Since there was nobody else in the bunker besides me and PFC Turner, there had to be something else going on down there. Very slowly, I turned my right hand over so the .45 was pointed directly at the foot of the bed. In the process, I forgot my feet were down there also. Moving as quickly and quietly as possible, I pointed my flashlight and snapped it on. I don't know who was more scared, me or the rat caught in the beam of my flashlight. So help me, Hannah, that had to have been the biggest rat I've ever seen in my life. For a split second, we looked at each other. Then a nerve twitched somewhere in my hand, and I pulled the trigger on the .45. The good Lord knows things surely did go downhill from there. Mr. Rat vanished. The .45 slug tore through the 1/2-inch plank at the end of the bunk and buried itself in the dirt wall. The .45 bounced in my hand from the recoil and ended up pointed at the ceiling. I dropped the flashlight and it rolled off the edge of the bed, still burning, and naturally fell into the 3 inches of mud on the floor. Dirt, which had been jarred loose from the ceiling by the blast of the gun, started falling on my face. Everything got deadly quiet for about a split second before cold fear hit me. I couldn't feel my feet. I tried to sit up straight in the bed, forgetting that there was not enough room to clear the ceiling, and bumped my head pretty good. I saw a few stars and my eyes crossed pretty good. In the middle of all this that was going on, Turner flopped out of his lower bunk and all 225 pounds of him landed in the 3 inches of gooey mud on the floor. He was thrashing around demanding to know what the hell I was shooting at. What's going on? What's going on? I screamed back at him that was shooting at a rat, and I thought I might have shot my damn foot off. Well, he told me, you better wish you did shoot your damn foot off, because if you didn't, as soon as I can find my gun, I'll shoot it off. It seemed that God really does look after fools and drunks, for once we retrieved the flashlight and shined it on my feet, both of them were still there. The bullet had passed through the sole of my left shoe, merely taking a small tear in my sock and barely breaking the skin. We had to explain to the guard on duty about shooting at old Mr. Rat and get the mud cleaned off of Turner so he could crawl back in the bed. And then I swallowed about a half a dozen aspirin and counted my toes one more time and went back to sleep. Mr. DeVore served in Korea as a member of the headquarters battery of the 623rd Field Artillery of the Kentucky National Guard, which was the only guard unit in Kentucky to see combat in Korea. He was taken prisoner and escaped. He was wounded in battle, at first near Heartbreak Ridge, and another time several months later. Operation Rat Killer, as you have heard, is obviously a lighter Korean War story that tells volumes about the living conditions that our soldiers endured. Mr. DeVore.
Where is June?
You remember me, don't you?
Okay. The cards for the veterans are with the flags. And my apologies to the Honor Guard. With all these changes, I've gotten kind of flummoxed, and we need to. Let's finish up with Mr. DeVore, and then do what you all had come to do. My apologies. Okay, Mr. DeVore is present with his family today, several family members. We thank Mr. DeVore for his military service with the 623rd during the Korean War, and we thank him for saving his photos and memorabilia of that time, and for writing down so many of his Korean experiences. Each story and each photo and artifact adds to our community's history. Are there any 1950 to 55 veterans or their families from Metcalfe County here today? No one? Okay.
There's one that he wasn't able to come. His name is Billy Pettigo.
Okay.
I'm a member of the post over there. He's the only other one in the county I know. But he wouldn't help. We was trying to get him here today. His name is Billy Pettigo.
Okay. Okay. Again, my apologies to the color guard. We want them to come up and finish their part of the program at this point in time. They had the volley fired outside. We had the national anthem, but there's also the presenting of the colors and the folding of the flag and taps that we still have yet to witness, and they are going to explain the meaning behind each thing that they do.
Sorry, we forgot our flag outside. Right. Join the crowd.
It's been one of those days, it's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you. I work for the city of Grace.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see a big crowd out. And we're going to give a presentation of what we usually do to honor our fallen veterans. The American flag is the symbol of our country. Congress designated it be 13 stripes to the flag to remind us of 13 colonies we started with. People have given it many names: Star Spangled Banner, Old Glory, Stars and Stripes. But the military refers to it as the colors. If you look at the top of the flag, there's a red stripe. That is for courage, zeal, and fortitude. The white stripes is for purity of purpose and right doing. The blue union on the flag represents all of, excuse me, represents the separate states. That all of them are joined together, supporting a chief who unites the whole, which is God's creation. Our first foal is a symbol of life. Our second foal is a symbol of our belief in the eternal life. Third foal, to honor and remembrance of all veterans that's departing our ranks. Fifth foal, because of our weaker nature, we're dependent on God in peace and in war. Four, a tribute to our beloved country. Sixth foal, For where our hearts lie, with our hearts we do pledge. Sevenfold, a tribute to the armed forces that's protecting us and our country. Eightfold, to honor the ultimate sacrifice of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Ninthfold is a tribute to womanhood and the love of all mothers. Tenthfold is a tribute to the sacrifices of all of our fathers. Eleventhfold, the lower portions of the seals of King David and Solomon. It glorifies in Hebrew eyes the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 12-fold represents the emblem in eternity for the Christians, and it glorifies the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Our 13th fold, which is our final fold, when completed, it will show only stars. It should remind us of the motto, "In God we trust." And the three corners should remind us of the Trinity.
I have in my possession 3 empty cartridges from 3 volleys of fire. Each one has a specific meaning that our brothers, even today, are dedicated to this. First one, duty.
Yes.
Honor.
Yes.
Country. Our country.
Yes.
All of us are dedicated to what we do. And we lay down our life today for our country.
At this time, ready to be presented to the ones going to receive the flag.
Thank you, DAV. Thank you, DAV Honor Guard, for starting us off so meaningfully. I have just a brief announcement, and then we will recognize Rollin L. Crow and his story. There was an exchange student who came here a few minutes ago, I'm told. She couldn't stay. She was from South Korea. But she wanted to thank the Korean veterans for what they did for her country. Rollin L. Crow's story of his military service in Korea is told by his sons, Richard and Brian Crow. If you would speak fairly close.
Okay, we'll try to. If I can get down that low. This was for my dad, it would be perfect height. Okay, it's not gonna go much farther. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to see so many people that showed up for today. The Korean War, like I said, is 74 years ago it started. And the Korean War, it's an honor for all to be here. It's an honor to see all the people that showed up. It's been 74 years since the Korean War started. And they called it the Forgotten War because it was in between the two greatest wars that people think about in this country, Vietnam and World War II. My dad was honored to defend this country. He spent 20-some years in the military. He was, like I said, his name is Rollin L. Crow. He's from Temple Hill, Kentucky, big city. He was born in March 26, 1933. So when the Korean War started, he was only 17 years old. Little did he realize when he joined the military in May of 1950 that he would be going to Korea by way of the 7th Infantry Division out of Fort Ord, or Camp Roberts, California. Actually, his purpose of joining the military was to get off the farm. His mother had moved to California when he was younger, and he wanted to get off the farm and out from underneath his grandfather's and from behind that plow, like he always used to say on his military records. They asked his occupation before he went into the military what it was, and it said he was a farmer. He plowed fields and raised tobacco. So it's an honor for him to have joined the military, like I said, and it was an honor for him to serve his country. Like I said, his ulterior goal was to get to California where his mother was at. Like I said, little did he know that the Korean War was going to start. As soon as he got to finished basic and AIT, they shipped him over to Camp Roberts in California. It's where the 7th Infantry Division was stationed. He was in the M Company, which is a heavy weapons company, and of the 3rd Battalion, the 32nd Infantry Regiment in the 7th Infantry Division. Now, they were not there when North Korea first attacked. They were, like I said, they were stationed in California. The U.S. government supplied troops from Japan to kind of stifle the North Koreans' attack and to slow them down until we could get troops over there and take back over to South Korea. Now, when he first got there, and you need to know that the Americans' goal for the war in Korea was to stop the flow of communism, because the North Koreans were supplied by the Russians and they were supplied by the Chinese, and their their goal was to take over South Korea, because after the war, World War II, Korea was divided into two countries: the Democratic People's Republic, which is North Korea, and the Southern South Korea, which is a free government. So when my dad, the Korean War started in June of 1950, and like I said, Dad was in California at that time. They shipped them all over to Korea, and when he first landed, he first landed at Incheon, which was over here next to Seoul, in Seoul, Korea, which is, by the time that my dad made it there, North Korea had already come down and pretty much captured everything in South Korea, except for this little area down here, which is called Pusan. Okay, my dad didn't land here. MacArthur, which was the commander of the United States troops in Korea, decided the best way to get the North Koreans out of South Korea was to make a naval landing at Incheon with the Marines and people from the 7th Infantry Division. So they landed there, and it was in September of 1950, only 3 months after all of this, after North Korea had invaded. North Korea had pretty much captured the whole South Korean country. And it was MacArthur's belief that if he came up to Seoul, which is up near close to the DMZ, which is called the 38th parallel, he decided he could cut off all their supplies and everything, and the North Koreans would have to move back out. So my dad was landed there. When he got there, he was assigned as a gunner on a 75 millimeter recoilless rifle. Now, he went to the basic training to be a tanker, and back then they had Sherman tanks, M4 Sherman tanks, stock left over from World War II and stuff like that. For some reason, he got assigned to a recoilless rifle, a heavy weapons company, and they didn't have tanks at that time. It's basically, he was the tank, and he carried the gun on his shoulders and everything like that. So he didn't get what he expected, but he got a little bit more than what he really expected. So at that point in time, they landed at Seoul, and that was in September of 1950. 3 months later, they were already taking back over the whole southern portion of South Korea. And on September 25th, Seoul was liberated, and the Americans, the units that were involved in that were the Marine Forces in the 7th Infantry Division, 1st Marine Division, and stuff like that. So once they landed in Seoul, they cut off all the supplies for the North Koreans, so the North Koreans started moving back north. It was a very fast, the things that went on in that war happened really quickly. Once Seoul was taken up back over, the United States, the 7th Infantry Division moved back down to Pusan, which is back down in here where all they did all their training and stuff like that down there. So once it was liberated, they took trucks and trains and everything else, and they moved back down to Pusan to do training, because the next phase of the war was to take it back to the North Koreans. So they boarded a ship on October 16th, the 7th Infantry Division, which my dad was stationed in there, and they went from Pusan. They were going to attack up in this area, which is called Woosan, but the South Korean army was moving up this coastline, and they were moving, and the North Koreans were withdrawing so fast that by the time the ships got there, the South Korean army had already taken that over. So then they had to land. It's farther up in here. It's called the harbor was called Iwon, and they landed there, and they stayed in that neck of the woods. And of course, you got to realize that at this point in time, China was getting really worried about what the Americans and the UN forces were going to do. So they started building forces up along their border, which is called the Yalu River, that divided North Korea from and China into separate sections. And my dad's battalion actually made it all the way to the Yalu River. So they were there when the Chinese attacked, and my dad said it was a very eerie way to be. He also, in their division, the Army was segregating, had been segregated through all of World War II. In the Korean War, that they were desegregation, black soldiers and white soldiers, and they actually had Korean forces integrated into the companies and down into the platoon levels, and they all worked together as a team. My dad was very animate when we were growing up that we should value a person by their what they've done and not what their color or anything like that is. He always reiterated that to me when I joined the military myself. He told me that, you know, respect a person for what they are, not what they look like. And I take that to this day, and I thank him for the core values that he instilled in us as we were growing up. You know, my dad wasn't a very talkative man, but when he did talk, you know, you pretty much listened to what he had to say. But anyways, he was in, like I said, they sailed the Luzon. It was all covered up. It was already freed, so they went up here to Incheon, Iwan, and my dad's battalion did, oh, okay. Okay. My dad's battalion actually, like I said, actually made it to the Yalu River, which is way up in here, before the Chinese attacked. Now, this was in November of 1950. Thanksgiving Day, actually, is when the Chinese attacked. The American forces were just everywhere, spread thin through this area. The Marines, as you look here on this map here, the Marines were in this area right here that's called the Frozen Chosen. Now, for some reason, this particular year, 1950 in North Korea, was a very, very cold year. Very cold. Some of the temperatures that they were fighting in was 20 and 30 degrees below zero. And, you know, at that temperature, things don't work, people don't work, machinery doesn't work. The whole time they were having to fight an enemy that was just a mass of people. And that's how the Chinese left it. They would use brute force instead of artillery and tanks and guns and stuff. They would just throw waves and waves of humans at the American fronts. My dad told me that one of the points that he made to me is when they were at the Yalu River, that the Chinese, before they attacked, he said they would get them all hyped up and they were blowing bugles, and he said that he could smell where that they were smoking opium and doing stuff like that, so that the Chinese soldiers would just be crazy, and they would do whatever they had to do just to get to the other side. So the whole time once that happened, of course the American forces were overwhelmed. There was like millions of Chinese that attacked at that point in time, and the Americans, they were probably maybe 100,000 Americans at this point in time across that region. And when you're being attacked by millions of, my dad said that on the Yalu River, they shot every round of ammunition that they had, and they were still coming. They were crawling, the Chinese were crawling all over top of one another just to get to the other side, to where the Americans were at. Americans lost many, many troops. The Chinese, of course, lost way more because, you know, the Americans had artillery, they had aircrafts, they had tanks, and they were just wiping out the Chinese troops. But China had so many troops they could just keep replacing them and replacing them. And so then the Americans retreated from up in the Yalu River area. They retreated back down into this town called Ham Hung, which was around the Christmas of 1950. And with all of them that went on, everything that went down, the 7th Infantry Division was ones that was used to hold the beachhead until everybody could get out. I think my dad said that they got out on like the 18th of December, and the last ship out was on like the 23rd or 24th of December. Would have been a heck of a Christmas present if you were still there. But the reason why the Chinese didn't come in and just try to literally wipe them out was because the Navy could hold them off at a long ways from the beachhead. So my dad, he was an Army man, but he appreciated the Navy, people in the Marines. He loved them all. Then after that, he came back down to Pusan, and they started training because the war was definitely not over at that point in time, because the Chinese had already come down into South Korea at that point in time. So MacArthur and the leaders, the American government, wanted to kick them back out. So the whole time, between January of 1951 and 1953, most of the battles occurred right around the DMZ, and that's where my dad was always stationed at. They moved up and down Central Korea, South Korea, back and forth across the 38th parallel, back and forth through Seoul. Seoul was probably captured by the Americans and the Chinese between the two of them 5 and 6 times. So that area was literally destroyed by the time this was all said and done. But this is where my dad was at when he got wounded. He got wounded on May 9th, 1950. He told us the story that an artillery shell came in and he got hit in his elbow. He had sent that home to my grandmother, and he doesn't know whatever happened to that. But then 15 days later, he was back out in the field, and at this point in time, when he got sent back to Pusan, they put him back into the tanks. So they were in a briefing before the battle, and somehow the Chinese seen them where they were collecting there, and they fired more mortar rounds at him, and he got wounded again with the white phosphorus. I don't know if anybody in here knows what white phosphorus is, but when it blows up, it catches on fire, and it's like a molten lava. And that's what those soldiers were wounded with. And luckily for them that there was a creek around, and the ones that didn't die from it wound up going down to this creek, and they had to sit in the creek in the middle of May in Korea to cut off the oxygen to this stuff so that they could go about their training in the battle. So my dad, he recuperated after that. He spent another 8-9 months in Korea. Not for sure, basically he was moving up and down a place called Pork Chop Hill, Meat Grinder, and just different areas within South Korea and North Korea. He finally got out of there in March of 1952 for his 19th birthday. He went back to California and went back to Camp Roberts, and there he's spent another 18 years in the military, traveling between New York. He was stationed at West Point in New York. He was at Camp Roberts in Georgia. No, that was California. Camp Gordon, Fort Bragg, New York. That's where I was born. Fort Dix, New Jersey. He was in Korea. He spent 2 more tours in Korea. He went back in '59. Maybe it was just one time in Korea, twice in Germany. But he was all over the world. He dragged us to Germany and back and forth through New York and West Point. West Point was an awesome place, but so many things that I was only 10 years old when he retired, but he was like they always say, once in, always in, and he was a lifer in the military, and he used that. He raised us like we were his soldiers, and and he took real good care of us. I love him for that and for the things that he taught us throughout the day. Oh, and my brother's got something that he wants to say.
Real quick, I just got a couple things to say. I want to say something about, it was either the 9th or the 10th fold on the flag. It's about mothers. And I just wanted to say something real quick about mothers, or spouses in general. You know, like Brian said, my dad joined the Army in 1950. He and my mom got married in 1956. My sister was born in 57. I was born in 58. He was born in 61. And our brother Chris was born in 65. So during that 14 years of marriage, my mom was left with 1 to 4 kids by herself, probably 4 of those years. So mothers and or spouses, they sacrificed a great deal. As a little kid who, when his dad went to Vietnam and you were watching Walter Cronkite on the news every night and you were thinking, gee, I hope my dad's not one of those numbers tomorrow. But it was always the mom or the spouse of some kind that was there, and, you know, it's good that they have a fold on that flag for the mothers and so forth. So thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your service and your sacrifice. That's it.
Is that any better in the back? Okay. Hold it real close to you, man.
Thank you to the Crow family for sharing your father's Korean War story. Our next segment is music, once again, beautiful music, led by Sarah Shepard, Byron Lucas, Susie Lucas, and students.
Oh, beautiful for space.
Thank you. Beautiful. Are there any Barron County veterans of 1950 to 55 present here today? Okay. We need to recognize him. Thank you for your service and for coming today. We appreciate it. Our next veteran story is the moving story of Eldridge Leon Ritter, who became a prisoner of war in November of 1950 and was finally released in August of 1953. His story reflects a news story interview of the time and words that he wrote about his experiences in Korea, and today is presented by Mr. Wade Lewis.
Sergeant Eldridge Leon Ritter was released from prison camp and put on a train to begin the long journey home. A few days later, he was met by his family at Fort Knox. The prayers of many had at long last been answered, and Mrs. Ritter's son had returned safely home. As Sergeant Ritter returned home to the Cave City community with his family by his side, he was hailed as the hero of Barron County. Friends and neighbors and townspeople lined the streets, and a 100-car parade was held in his honor with an estimated crowd of more than 1,000 people. A ceremony, perhaps the largest ever held in the Cave City community for a single individual, was held on the school grounds. And Sergeant Ritter was presented with many gifts and honors that day, including a gold watch and savings bonds, as well as being honored with messages from state and federal officials, including the news that the then Governor Lawrence Weatherby had signed Sergeant Ritter's commission as a Kentucky colonel. To say the least, the people of his community were very proud and grateful. However, none of this would have been possible had God not extended his gracious mercy and watched over this young man during his time of tribulation. Shortly after arriving in Cave City, the following article was printed in the Cave City Progress. This article describes the Army service, capture, and imprisonment of Sergeant Leon Ritter as told by him to Hampton Reynolds sometime in late August 1953. The headline reads, "Former Prisoner of War Tells of His Experiences." And the following is in Leon Ritter's own words. And this is what he says. "The story of my service in the Army really begins in Louisville. For it was there that I enlisted on April 17, 1950, when I was still 18 years old. At that time, I was employed at a photographic studio, having gone to Louisville from Cave City, where I'd lived since 1939. After enlistment, I was sent to Fort Knox for 14 weeks of basic training, and it was while I was there that the Korean War broke out. At the completion of the training period, I spent a furlough with my folks at Cave City, then left on August 4th for Seattle, unaware of what lay in store for me almost the other side of the world. From Seattle, I was flown to Camp Drake in Japan, and there was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division as a platoon runner and rifleman. My stay in Japan was short, only 2 weeks, and on September 5th, I was sent to Korea, landing at the famed port of Busan. There, I was attached to Company L of the 8th Regiment. It was the period of the frantic months in the early part when replacements were badly needed for the United Nations forces, and I was plunged immediately into the fierce battle then raging about Taegu, which the Reds had sworn to capture and General Douglas MacArthur maintained as steadfastly to defend. Despite shortages of supplies and heavy casualties, the line was held, and then came the victorious sweep to the north past the 38th parallel and deep into North Korean territory. My own unit pushed 100 miles north of Pyongyang, the Red Korean capital, and it was here, far inside the communist border, that I was captured. It was the morning of November 2nd, 1950, about 2:30 a.m. My regiment had just come off a hill and into a flat area when it was hit by a force of Reds estimated at 80,000 men. We fought bitterly as long as we could, but the Reds overran us. Many were wounded or killed, others were captured, but about 150 of a group to which I belong escaped into the hills. It was there on this date of November 2nd, 1950, that I was listed as missing. But I was not actually taken prisoner until 3 days later. Although we had no supplies and no communications, we remained in hiding in the hills, hoping to rejoin the main body of our troops. About 9:30 a.m. on the morning of November 5th, there were about 35 of us in one group at the base of a hill. A patrol which we had sent out reported none of the enemy about, and we started to climb the hill. Suddenly the Reds, we learned they were Chinese communists and not North Koreans, rose up all about us. Resistance was futile and we surrendered. In my particular group there were 5 men, 4 Yanks and 1 Gook or South Korean. We were disarmed and then forced to carry the Red supplies as we were taken into hiding in a nearby hill. We remained under cover until dark, then were fed, then moved on. For 10 days we traveled in this fashion, hiding in the day and moving at night only, for the Reds feared the U.S. planes which constantly scouted the area. On reaching the Yalu River, we were told we would be taken to Camp Number 5 across the river. I was forced to wait overnight, however, for the ferry was too heavily loaded to carry the truck on which I was riding. That night, Camp Number 5 was bombed, forcing a change in the Red plans. Instead, I was taken back about 10 miles to a group of farm buildings which formed a prison camp, the first of several I was to know in my 3 years of captivity. And here I stayed until mid-January of 1951. In the makeshift prison camp, conditions were fairly good. There was some brutality with which the public is now familiar, but I was able to get by fairly well. Our chief food consisted of cracked corn and millet, a diet on which many lost weight rapidly, although I lost only a few pounds. It was a cold winter in Korea, and the suffering was intensified because most of the men were wearing only thin fatigues. The Korean climate is much more rigorous than it is here in Kentucky, too, with 40 degrees below temperatures not being uncommon. My first experience with communist indoctrination came in the farm prison camp, when we were given Red literature. However, there was little stress on such activities at this time, although later training in communist ideology was stepped up and in fact occupied much of our time. On January 18th, I was shifted to Camp Number 5 and remained there until October 1951. Conditions were about the same as in the first camp, and treatment of prisoners was little different. While at Camp Number 5 on September 5th, 1951, I received my first letter from home. Earlier in February, I'd been allowed to write home, and the letter was received by my folks at Cave City, the first direct word they had had from me since I was listed as missing in November 1950. One bright spot I remember in the summer of 1951 was when the first truce talks began. We had only little information about the negotiations, but we noticed a big difference in the treatment we received, and our chow was far better than that to which we had been accustomed. Our hopes were high at first, but the weeks dragged by without hearing anything definite. There was a well-developed grapevine in the prison camps, by which we received bits of news now and then, but it was not altogether reliable. Sometimes we were allowed to read communist newspapers printed in English and to listen to the Peiping radio broadcasts through a loudspeaker set up in the prison compound. But we never were permitted to listen to American broadcasts. On October 18, 1951, I was again moved, this time to Camp Number 3 at Chongsong on the Yalu River. I was to remain at this camp for the balance of the war. The winter of 1951 was especially bitter, and it was during this period when most of the prison brutality with which I was familiar occurred, principally for stealing firewood to make fires. Despite the cruel treatment, there was little thought of escape, for we were far behind enemy lines in a strange and hostile country. I had earlier been sent to a Red school for communist indoctrination, and now this program of attempting to change the political minds of the captives was pressed even harder. The schooling continued daily. with Red officers endlessly repeating the same propaganda charges, questioning the prisoners and demanding satisfactory answers. Those who gave the right answers, whether they believed them or not, received better food and treatment. At first, there was little attention paid to the Red propaganda line by anyone, but as the time lengthened and the harangues continued, there were some progressives who either sympathized or said they did with the doctrinaire sermons and the Red party line. One of the chief reasons for the weakness of some seemed to be the belief that cut off from home and with weeks and months passing, they were seemingly forgotten men. Throughout this spring and early summer, we kept hearing grapevine reports of the armistice talks at Panmunjom, but our hope had been dashed so often before that we were not sure we would be released, until the guards told us on July 27th that the war was over and we were to be freed. Food and treatment in the last days of captivity improved immeasurably. I remained at the prison camp until August 16th and was put on a train and sent to Khe Sanh. 2 days were spent in the tent camp there and 2 more days at the repatriation center before I left from the port of Incheon to sail to San Francisco. At my release, I was notified that I had been promoted to the rank of sergeant. From California, I flew to Fort Knox, where I was met by my folks and then drove to Cave City. On the boat trip across the Pacific, we were told that there would likely be celebrations when we arrived at home, but I had no idea such a welcome would be staged for me, and the program last week in Cave City was almost overwhelming. Right now, I want to say that I deeply and sincerely appreciate everything done for me. The nice gifts, the many kindnesses by so many individuals and organizations. The people of Cave City can never know how much this has meant to me, and I shall never forget this wonderful spirit of friendliness and neighborliness. As for the future, I've made no immediate plans. I just want to rest up for a while and enjoy myself in this greatest country in the world. The conclusion of this article reads, upon his return home, the mayor of Cave City declared Sergeant Ritter Day and honored him with the title of Kentucky Colonel. Ritter was awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge, the Purple Heart, the Korean Service Medal, a Prisoner of War Medal, and the National Defense Medal. While this article describes the manifold hardships faced by Sergeant Ritter during his time as a prisoner of war, only the Lord and Sergeant Ritter truly know the many straits and trials he had to overcome. It is beyond all doubt that he faced much more than the hardships described here. And one can easily imagine the many hours of hopelessness he endured as a prisoner of war. The people of the Cave City community of 1953 were thankful that Almighty God had extended his hand of protection to Sergeant Ritter during this time of crisis. Thank you.
I know there are several family members, Ritter family members here today. Would you raise your hands so we can recognize you? They're way in the back. Tom Ritter, Leon's brother, visited the museum last year and told the volunteers at the front desk about his brother, Eldridge Leon Ritter. When I contacted Tom Ritter about this program and the exhibit, he contacted family who are now scattered in several states. Each one sent photos, news articles, letters, and things Leon Ritter had written about his military experiences. These family photos and papers and document a valuable part of local history. Thank you, Ritter family, for the sacrifices that were made years ago during the Korean War, and thank you for documenting the family history, keeping it all these years, and for sharing it with this community. Let me also I want to also add that we also respect that many veterans cannot or do not wish to share their war experiences. This does not diminish their service to our country. Our nation thrives today because of all veteran services. The Hart County veteran is First Lieutenant Charles B. Moran. Charles B. Moran was a pilot who served during World War II and Korea. First Lieutenant Moran's story is told by Mr. Todd Steenbergen.
The following information about First Lieutenant Charles Moran came from the Aviation Heritage Park in Bowling Green and from other local newspaper articles published at the time. Charles Moran II came from humble beginnings in Horse Cave, Kentucky. Born in 1924, he was raised primarily by his grandfather, who was a baseball figure and Center College football coach. Moran developed a passion for basketball and aviation. He starred in basketball at Horse Cave High School and played in the Kentucky-Indiana All-Star Game in 1941. In 1942, he played for E.A. Diddle at Western State Teachers College, now Western Kentucky University. Two of his well-known teammates were John Oldham and Dero Downing. Soon after his freshman year, Charles Moran enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps in 1943. He was commissioned as a flight officer that year and flew B-17 bombers and remained stateside at Ellington Field in Houston, Texas, and it was there he met his wife. He was sent to Biloxi, Mississippi to qualify in the North American B-25 Mitchell twin-engine bomber and was there at the close of World War II. Moran, his wife, and 3-year-old son were transferred to Itazuke, Japan in 1948, where he learned the skills of night fighting in the P-61 Black Widow fighter plane, and then transitioned to the North American F-82 Twin Mustang all-weather interceptor. And this aircraft used 2 P-51 fuselages connected together with one of the largest and most powerful radar units in the United States Air Force inventory at the time, slung under the center wing. 6 50 caliber machine guns provided the bite of this versatile machine. The Korean War started on June 25, 1950, and the Japan-based F-82s of the 68th All-Weather Fighter Interceptor Squadron were the closest Air Force assets to this invasion. On June 27th, Moran and his squadron were called upon to provide a protective screen for civilians evacuating Kimpo Air Base near Seoul. While providing cover, a group of North Korean fighters attacked the twin Mustangs. Moran was hit, but maneuvered his fighter to destroy a Yak-9 while simultaneously Flight Leader Hudson shot down a Yak-11. This was the first air combat of the war, with Hudson subsequently credited with the first air-to-air victory. Another F-82 pilot, Lieutenant Keith Bobo, was an eyewitness to both actions, however, and stated that Moran's victory had been the first. Moran received the Air Medal for his actions that day. The Evening Journal of July 28, 1950, reported in an article titled, "Horse Cave Flyer Directs Raid in South Korea." Here's a quote. Lieutenant Moran said fire from his fighter plane struck tanks, vehicles, and artillery pieces in the Yekon area. First Lieutenant William G. Hudson, who strafed at Yasu, said, quote, "We really used our machine guns and rockets against those marshalling yards. We observed fires burning in the area when we left. Dummy guns were detected on the top of the hill overlooking Yasu, but the real nest were not camouflaged." Just 40 days later, on August 7th, Moran and his radar observer took off on a night intruder mission over a mountainous region near Sunsun, North Korea, and was never heard from again. The Evening Journal local newspaper of August 10th, 1950, reported, relatives of Lieutenant Charles B. Moran, 26, Horse Cave, were notified yesterday that he is missing in Korea. The wreckage of his F-82G was found 18 months later after friendly forces entered the area. Villagers had buried the bodies, and they were recovered. Lieutenant Charles B. Moran's body was returned to Horse Cave, Kentucky on May 29, 1952, and was laid to rest in the family plot. Lieutenant Charles Moran is remembered at the Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Today, we remember First Lieutenant Charles Moran of Hart County.
Thank you, Mr. Steenbergen. Is there anyone here today representing the Charles Moran family? Are there any Hart County veterans of 1950 to 55 here today? Okay, I gotta go back to the front. Our next veteran story is an Allen County story of Corporal Calvin Coolidge Brown. This is also presented by Mr. Todd Steenbergen.
The following veteran story was researched and written by volunteers of the Allen County Historical Society for presentation today to honor and remember Corporal Calvin Coolidge Brown, Sr. Corporal Calvin Coolidge Brown, Sr., the son of George Ralston Brown and Anna Lewis Benon Brown, was born on December 5th, 1924, when Calvin Coolidge was president, I might add. He was a native of Allen County, Kentucky. Calvin registered with the Army shortly after his 18th birthday on December 18th. He served in World War II from 1943 to 1945 in the Army, and he was called back to service during the Korean conflict, serving from 1948 to 1951. Progressing through the ranks, he became a corporal in the Armored Division of the Army while in South Korea, with the Occupational Specialty Code of Supply Records Specialist, 3rd Infantry Division of the Tank Battalion. On March 23, 1951, Corporal Brown was seriously wounded in action during a missile attack. Due to the severity of his injuries, he was listed as separated from duty on April 11, 1951, and returned home to Scottsville, Kentucky. During his years of service to our nation, Corporal Brown received the Purple Heart Award and Oak Leaf Cluster. After returning home to Scottsville, Mr. Brown was very active in the Allen County community. He was a member of the Ward's Chapel AME Church, the Disabled American Veterans, and MOC AM Vets Post number 110. He will probably be remembered by most, especially among many other veterans, as the post commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, post number 5712 in Scottsville, commander of the American Legion post number 259, and a 3-term 5th District commander. Calvin was a very determined Veterans Benefits field representative for the VA hospitals in Nashville and Murfreesboro, Tennessee. In 1966, he, Don Bonds, Dickie Stovall, and Reed Lyons marched in the color guard for the American Legion Post 259, presenting the flags and leading the parade through town with the Scottsville High School Marching Band. If you ever had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Brown, you would never forget him. He always could be found wearing his garrison cap with such honor and symbolism of his pride of service. He was forever smiling, highly energetic, enthusiastic, and very determined in whatever goals he set. He was driven to see that each veteran received everything they deserved when it came to obtaining the benefits they needed and so deserved. His life is a source of pride and inspiration to our community. Mr. Brown had a very large and loving family of 6 daughters, 4 sons, 18 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren at the time of his death on October 4th, 2004. He is interred at Crown Hill Cemetery with his military marker showing his distinguished service honors. Today, we honor the life and service of Corporal Calvin Coolidge Brown, Sr. of Allen County.
I believe some of his family is here. Would you raise your hand? Thank you for attending. Are there any other Allen County veterans here today of that time period? Okay. I want to also thank our Allen County Historical Museum for researching and sharing the story of Calvin Coolidge Brown. In addition, Allen County volunteers have carefully researched and found well over 400 veteran names. These names are each listed in the Allen County binder upstairs on the 2nd floor. Okay. Once again, we are honored to hear music from Sarah Shepard, Byron, and Susie Lucas.
Let us sing for unsung heroes, those who lay their dreams aside, choosing honor more than glory, pledging faith with quiet pride. Those whose uniform is courage, yet are unashamed of tears, finding in their love of freedom power stronger than their fears. Sing a song for unsung heroes, sing from sea to shining sea, as our faithful sing before you, sing the song of liberty. Let us sing for unsung heroes, those who answer freedom's call, those united by one purpose, all for one and one for all. We will sing and not be silenced. We will keep our voices strong. For as long as we keep singing, freedom's cry will still live on. Sing our song for unsung heroes, sing from sea to shining sea, as the faithful sing before you, sing the song of liberty. Sing the song of liberty. the song of liberty. America.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you for such inspiring music and beautiful voices. Mr. Roy McMillan, a Monroe County native, was inducted into the Army and was sent to Korea after the intensive fighting. The story he wrote about his experiences in Korea is to be presented today by Wade Lewis. So there's a little change there. Mr. Jackson is a bit under the weather. So Mr. Wade Lewis.
Roy McMillan was the son of Willie and Belle McMillan, as well as the uncle of Miss McPherson, a volunteer here at the Cultural Center, who was instrumental in putting this program together, so we thank you for that as well. He grew up on Big Sulphur Creek in Monroe County, Kentucky, the youngest of 13 children. What follows are the memories which Roy McMillan wrote concerning his experiences while in the military and in Korea. Roy McMillan entered the Army on April 28, 1953, along with 7 other men from Monroe County. They were sent to Fort Meade, Maryland for 10 days, after which 3 of them came back to Fort Knox for basic training. During the summer of 1953, while in basic training, his company, the 32nd Tank Company, was called up for regimental guard duty. Everyone spent hours cleaning their rifles and shining their boots and preparing for inspection. And when they arrived at regimental headquarters, they all lined up for inspection, and their officer walked in front of them, closely inspecting each one of them. And they were all standing at attention with their rifles in front of them, and they watched the officer's shoulder, and when they detected movement, they dropped the rifle into the officer's hand. And when the officer grabbed Roy's rifle, it fell apart, as the trigger housing had not fully seated in place when Roy had reassembled it after cleaning. And the now liberated pieces of Roy's rifle crashed to the pavement at the officer's feet. And to say the least, his commanding officer was not very happy. And for his punishment, Roy had to write the 16 general orders 30 times each by the next morning. And he wrote them all a total of 18 times and said that if he had written them the full 30 times, he would have needed until the next night to get them all done. At least, he said, I didn't have to walk guard duty that night. Roy went through 8 weeks of infantry training and 8 weeks of tank training, and afterwards he was sent to Camp Pendleton, California for 4 weeks of amphibious tank training, part of which entailed driving a tank out into the ocean. After his training at Camp Pendleton, his unit was sent to Camp Stoneman, California, with a 10-day delay en route. With no place to stay, they stopped at Fort Ord, California, but were not allowed to stay there. So Roy and 3 other soldiers traveled on to Monterey. They didn't have money to stay at a hotel, so the 4 went to the jailhouse, thinking they might get a bunk for the night. The jailer called a local church, which acquired a hotel room for them, and then they wired home for money to fly home. They purchased their plane tickets at Monterey, but the plane didn't stop at Monterey because it was too foggy to land. And since the next flight out of Monterey wasn't for another 24 hours, the airline hired a limousine to take them to the airport in San Francisco, where they flew to Chicago. The 4 adrift soldiers decided to meet in Chicago 3 days late for their return trip to California. One of the guys turned chicken and went back on time, but the other 3 stuck to their plan. And when they arrived back at Camp Stoneman 3 days late, the clerk asked if this was an quote-unquote organized AWOL. They told him yes, and he wrote something up and put it in their records. After a week at Camp Stoneman, they boarded the General Walker, and 17 days later were in Sasebo, Japan, where they stayed for 6 or 7 days before going to Korea. There were around 15,000 GIs in one big stadium. Each one was carrying his own Army records, and someone with a microphone was letting them know which documents to have ready and in what order. And while going through his papers, Roy and his buddy from Indiana found notes in their files stating they had reported to Camp Stoneman 3 days late. And amazingly, those AWOL papers were somehow lost in the stadium, and Roy never heard anything else about it. 1 week later, on Christmas Eve, 1953, Roy arrived in Camp Jasalin in Korea. The temperature was around 15 degrees, and he was assigned to a squad tent housing around 12 men and no heat source. They were given sleeping bags and learned in a hurry that you didn't so much as take off your outer layer of clothes if you had any chance of staying warm. The next day, Roy arrived at his assigned post, a tank company of the 7th Division, with which he would stay from December 1953 until April 1955. He drove a tank dozer for several months and then was promoted to tank commander for the remainder of his time there. Once, since Roy was experienced driving a tank dozer, he was ordered to dig a swimming pool in the creek that ran by the camp for the men to use when they came off duty. The fighting was over by the time Roy arrived in Korea, but many of the men in Roy's squad tent had been involved in combat before the truce. However, Roy's company still rotated up to the DMZ periodically to watch the North Koreans. And while in the rear, their officers kept the men on their toes just in case the North Koreans decided to invade, periodically calling out, "The North Koreans are coming." And everyone would rush to their assigned battle roles. Because Roy belonged to a tank company with a lot of vital and valuable equipment with fewer men than an infantry unit, guard duty was a constant. One night, Roy was taken out to the ammo storage area to pull guard duty. It was 15 miles from nowhere, and the night was so dark he could hardly see his hand in front of his face. Roy could hear limbs breaking on one hill and then on another, and he said, "Believe me, I stayed awake." As you can tell by now, Roy's time in Korea specifically, and the Army in general, was anything but dull. The men in Roy's squad tent adopted an orphan Korean boy who hung around the camp, whom they called Mike, and let him live in the tent with them. There were USO shows that traveled through Korea performing for the troops, and once even Marilyn Monroe came to the camp. But there were so many people crowding around the stage, Roy didn't get to see her. But when the Ink Spots performed at Roy's camp, he was assigned to guard duty on stage while they were singing, and he got to see that show. Then there was the time that Roy and some men from his unit were sent to Japan for R&R. Roy was on a plane flying back to Korea from Japan, and the plane started flying sideways. An engine had gone out mid-flight, but thankfully they made it back to the airport in Korea safely. Roy left Korea the first week of April 1955. 17 days later, he was in Seattle, Washington, and Roy and another guy had planned on hitching a ride back to Louisville instead of going on the train with the rest of the company. But they were put in charge of one of the passenger cars, which held 38 men, and had to go on the train after all. Roy arrived at Fort Knox 3 days later and was discharged from the Army on April 26, 1955. And when it was all said and done, Roy said, and I quote, "What a ride, but glad I was able to do it." Thank you.
Mr. McMillan is with us today, and his niece as well, and his wife. Okay, I'll let you raise your hand or somehow be identified. We thank Mr. McMillan and his niece Wilmetta for writing down his memories and for organizing photos of the time. Those of us who have never experienced military service can never know precisely what our soldiers have undergone. We can appreciate military service and the sacrifices that were endured by our soldiers better when family and community members are able to read about these experiences and see photos and artifacts of the time. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Are there any other Monroe County veterans of the time? Thank you, Mr. McMillan, for traveling so far to be here. Our final veteran story highlights the women who served their country during the period of 1950 to 55. This story is presented by Cheryl Embach. Speak right into it.
Okay, thanks. These have been some of the most fascinating stories I've ever heard. As the wife, daughter, granddaughter, and sister of veterans, I've heard quite a few stories, but I think these today top all of those. As in World War II, women made sacrifices on the home front, maintaining the households while their husbands went to war. In the Armed Services Integration Act in 1948, women were allowed to become permanent members. And following that, of course, a lot of things changed. The act was passed, and except for nurses, they were only allowed in the war zones during their military time at that point. That was in 1950. During the Korean War, there were 120,000 women on active duty. 1/3 were hired as healthcare providers. When their country called, they volunteered for service in the Women's Army Corps, WAC, the Women in the Air Force, WAF, and the Navy Women's Reserves, WAVES. Women also were members of the Marine Corps, but they didn't seem to have any cute names. The medical personnel serving in Korea in Mobile Army Hospital, Surgical Hospitals, or MASH, on medevac aircraft, and on board hospital ships. Air Force nurses had important roles in evacuating injured soldiers from the battlefield zone in Korea and treating or triaging their wounds. They served in the hospitals located in Japan, Hawaii, and the U.S. that were receiving the wounded from Korea. 18,000 military women died. 18 military women died during the Korean War in service to their country. Several civilian women also died. As they did in World War II, the women from the Barrens responded to the calls for service and were stationed in Korea. Thelma Miller Emmert from Monroe County served in the U.S. Marine Corps in World War II. She served as a Department of Army civilian employee in Korea. She was a secretary in the Civil Affairs section at the Korean Communication Zone headquarters. This section helped coordinate relief assistance to the Republic of Korea government. She arrived in the Far East in December 1951, serving at the Far East Command headquarters in Tokyo before going to Korea. Sarah Wayne Hurt Miller from Metcalfe County was an officer in the U.S. Navy Nursing Corps. She served from October 16, 1952 until September 30, 1953. She was the daughter of Lannis and Clara Bowles Hurt. She was a graduate of the Nashville General Hospital School of Nursing, was a registered nurse for 49 years, and was a Red Cross Gray Lady with over 3,000 hours as a Navy relief volunteer. She died in 2005 and was buried at sea by the U.S. Navy. Sandra Sackett of Allen County, Kentucky, served United States Air Force during the Korean conflict. Ida Mae Souls Stevens, also of Allen County, served as a Specialist 3 in the Army from 1954 to 1956. She was a nurse in the Veterans Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, until her death in 1981 at age 48 years. Finally, Joan Edmonds Evans served in the United States Army from 1951 until 1953.
Thank you, Cheryl. Are there any women who have served in the military here today? June is bringing you a thank you. Thank you to our veterans and to their families for sharing their stories, and in so doing, making our local history more complete and even more significant, and for helping all of us appreciate the meaning of service and sacrifice for one's country. Thank you to our presenters, Todd Steenbergen, Wade Lewis, Richard and Brian Crow, Jesse Brown and Cheryl Ambach, for doing an excellent job reminding us our freedoms are not free, but come with a steep price. We are indebted to our sister museums and historical societies of each of these 5 counties for their research and sharing veterans' names and photos and information. Thank you to the DAV Disabled American Veterans Chapter number 20 for starting our program off in such a meaningful way. For the musicians, vocalists, Sarah Shepard, Byron and Susie Lucas, and the students who inspired all of us with their beautiful vocal music. Besides the volunteers I've just mentioned, there have been a host of regular museum volunteers and staff who have contributed to this day. Through researching, gathering artifacts, printing photos, sharing ideas and resources, contacting families for veteran information, getting chairs, creating posters, and so much more. During the planning of this program, we discussed ways to show appreciation to our veterans who served between 1950 and 1955. And it was decided to make a donation in their honor to the DAV Chapter number 20. The DAV is an organization that benefits all veterans and does not charge for their services. They provide the honor guard for veteran funerals throughout this region of Kentucky and some as far as Tennessee, upon request, as well as other community events like this one. They assist veterans and their families in obtaining needed services. They assist veterans in transitioning to civilian life and more. The donation will benefit all veterans and is given in honor of our local veterans who served between 1950 and 55. If you would like to contribute to this donation, the box is located in the front desk at the lobby, right out here. The actual donation will be made at a later date, but we would like to collect for that donation today. Please visit the exhibit in the gallery on the second floor to learn more about the veterans from our 5-county area. Browse the binders for veteran information of each of our 5 counties. The exhibit will be up until the middle of July, and the binders are a permanent part of our collection here at the museum. If you are a veteran of 1950 to 55, please take time to be sure and have your photo made on the lobby steps with your family. We would definitely like a photo of all of you together as well. We have Mr. DeVore, Mr. McMillan, Mr. Bowles. Are there other veterans of that time period that are here today? Okay, we would like a photo of all of you. To conclude, I'd like to share this Ronald Reagan quote, and this is directed at all veterans. Let us reflect on the great achievements of those whose sacrifices preserved our freedom and our way of life. With a spirit of pride and gratitude, let us recall their heroic accomplishments and thank them for their unselfish devotion to duty. They are indeed worthy of the solemn tribute of a grateful nation. Thank you all for coming.